Imagine this. You walk into a room, a public place, nothing unusual, a cafe, a boardroom, a family gathering. You laugh a little too loud. You speak your mind, uninhibited. You share a small vulnerability, a story about your fears, your struggles, the ache behind your ambition. For a moment you feel seen, understood, humans. But then something changes, a flicker in someone's eye, a pause too long. The conversation shifts. People laugh, but not with you. You begin to feel it, the invisible hand of judgment tightening, reshaping the air around you. You didn't break a law. You didn't hurt anyone. But you broke something far more dangerous, the unspoken rules, not of morality, not of decency, but of power. And here lies the silent paradox of modern life. In a world that screams, "Be yourself," those who dare to be fully seen often become targets. The more authentic you are in public, the more information you give away. And in the wrong hands, your honesty becomes a weapon, your kindness a weakness, your laughter ammunition. Niccolo Machiavelli, the political philosopher often misquoted as cold and manipulative, didn't warn us against morality. He warned us against naivete. He understood that public life is not a stage for truth, but a battlefield for perception. We like to believe that civilization is built on shared values, mutual respect, and a collective sense of right and wrong. But Machiavelli would ask, is it really? Or is it built on appearances, on control, on fear disguised as etiquette? He wrote not for kings and tyrants alone, but for anyone forced to survive among others, for the ordinary person who must navigate a world where being too visible is dangerous and being too invisible is fatal. He knew that power flows not from who you are, but from what others think you are. And once that image is compromised, once you say the wrong thing, show the wrong emotion, or trust the wrong person, the damage is done. What if you've already revealed too much? What if, in your attempt to be kind, you've invited subtle sabotage? What if, in a moment of vulnerability, you gave away the blueprint to your own destruction? These aren't just abstract fears, they are real psychological mechanisms, traps laid by society and often by yourself. Because deep down, we are all watching each other, measuring, comparing, collecting data, even when we smile. And that's where the danger lies. It's not what you do behind closed doors that ruins you. It's what you misjudge in public. So the real question isn't, what's the worst thing I can do? It's what seemingly harmless behaviors are quietly dismantling my power, my reputation, my control, because without me realizing it, the laugh that lasts too long, the complaint disguised as confession, the moment you defend yourself when silence would have made you mysterious. These are not just social faux pas, these are tactical errors. And Machiavelli, ever the realist, would urge you to study them like a surgeon studies blood vessels. Because in the public arena, even kindness can be a liability if poorly timed. You think you're just being honest, but someone is watching and they're taking notes. There are 11 things you should never do in public, not because they are wrong, but because they reveal you. They make you predictable. They signal that you do not understand the quiet war playing out in every social space. The war for narrative, for advantage, for invisible dominance. And if you don't understand this war, you're already losing it. Now ask yourself, what have you already revealed? What has already been used against you, even in silence? And what could you unlearn if only someone finally told you what never to do? Let's begin. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Most people do not see you as you are. They see you as they need you to be. And the moment you violate that expectation, by being too honest, too loud, too emotional, too intelligent, too anything, their perception shatters. But instead of adjusting their view, they punish you for it. This is not a flaw in their character. It's a flaw in the design of social existence. Carl Jung called it the persona, the mask we wear to survive in society. It's not entirely fake nor entirely true. It's a curated version of the self, tailored to what the room can tolerate. And the danger is not that we wear it. The danger is forgetting that we must. Because when you drop your mask at the wrong time, you're not seen as authentic. You're seen as unstable, as someone who doesn't know their place. In public, unpredictability isn't charming. It's a threat. This Machiavelli understood before modern psychology ever had language for it. He didn't tell us to be dishonest. He told us to be strategic. He observed that people are not governed by truth. They are governed by impressions. And impressions, once formed, are difficult to undo. So if you let emotion overpower timing, if you confess your doubts before securing loyalty, or if you show weakness before establishing value, you become vulnerable to subtle exile. Nietzsche once warned, "Whoever fights monsters should see to it that in the process he does not become a monster." But what he didn't say is that those who never learn to fight at all become prey. If you do not study the nature of public behavior, if you dismiss it as trivial or manipulative, you leave yourself at the mercy of those who never stopped watching. Let's go deeper. Why do people react so sharply to what seems harmless? A moment of emotion, a slip of confidence, an unfiltered thought. Because the public mind is not rational. It is tribal. It seeks safety through cohesion, through norms, predictability, and alignment. Anything that threatens the equilibrium, even subconsciously, is treated as a virus in the social bloodstream. You may think you're sharing your truth, but others experience it as instability. You might think you're making a connection, but if the moment isn't earned, you're just leaking power. Schopenhauer, ever the pessimist, believed that human behavior is not driven by logic, but by a blind, irrational will. A will to survive, to dominate, to satisfy its ego. So when you act with innocence in a space governed by egoic instincts, you are not respected for your openness. You are judged for your lack of control. This is the hidden architecture of shame. It's why you feel that sting after oversharing. It's why silence after a joke feels like a courtroom verdict. It's why you replay conversations late at night wondering why your truth sounded like a mistake. Because public spaces are not neutral arenas, they are mirrors built from fear and desire. Every gesture, every word, every glance, all of it runs through a filter of primitive logic. Does this person make me feel stronger or weaker? Are they threat, tool, or ornament? If you think that's cynical, understand this. It's not about malice. It's about survival psychology. Humans are wired for status awareness. In every interaction, your mind is calculating, often unconsciously, where you stand in the hierarchy. That's why a stranger's humiliation makes you cringe. That's why public embarrassment is more painful than private failure. Your brain treats loss of status as a threat to survival, because for most of evolutionary history it was. A single misstep in the tribe could mean isolation, and isolation historically meant death. Fast forward to today. The tribe has become the crowd. The jungle has become the office, the internet, the dinner table. And exile no longer looks like banishment. It looks like being overlooked, misunderstood, misquoted, quietly dismissed. And worst of all, you often don't even know it's happening. People don't always attack you directly. They just stop defending you. They let your name dissolve in silence when it's mentioned. They watch you stumble and choose not to catch your fall. Not because they hate you, but because you became socially expensive to be near. That's how public mistakes work in today's world. You're not punished. You're quietly deleted. This is why Machiavelli's insights remain disturbingly relevant. He didn't speak in terms of dopamine, tribal psychology, or Jungian shadows, but he understood their effects long before science caught up. He knew that survival in public life requires more than morality. It requires strategy, restraint, and the capacity to read the room like a battlefield. And this is the root of the problem. Most people walk into public spaces unarmed. They believe the world rewards truth. It does not. It rewards narrative. It rewards those who understand timing, those who speak only when the soil is fertile, those who never confuse vulnerability with freedom. So ask yourself, not just, what should I never do in public? Ask, what part of me keeps wanting to, and why? Because that part of you, the one that overshares, overdefends, or tries too hard to belong, is not evil. It's untrained. It is the child within, still looking for unconditional acceptance in a world that doesn't offer it. To master public behavior is not to become manipulative. It is to become aware. To know that even silence is a message, that absence is a power move, that sometimes the most strategic act is to do nothing at all. But what happens when you fail to recognize this in time? What are the real consequences of ignoring these truths, not just psychologically but practically? That is what we must face next. You don't notice it at first. Because consequences, when they are psychological, don't arrive with alarms or thunderclaps. They settle slowly, like dust in an abandoned room. They creep into the pauses of conversations, the tension in your shoulders, the silence after your name is mentioned and no one replies. This is the tragedy of misstepping in public. The punishment is rarely immediate. It's invisible, delayed, almost always deniable. You think people moved on, but something shifted. And here's the twist. They may not even know it consciously, because the human mind is wired for pattern detection, not truth detection. Once someone perceives you as weak, as needy, as too emotional, too volatile, too unaware, that impression calcifies. And no matter how much good you do afterward, that one crack in your mask becomes the story. Why? Because of the confirmation bias, a cognitive glitch that makes people seek evidence for what they already believe. If someone once perceived you as overreacting or oversharing, every calm action afterward is filtered as an exception, not the rule. Their internal verdict is already stamped. Now imagine this plays out across multiple people. Now imagine it's at work, at a family gathering, in friend circles, online spaces, or romantic beginnings. You're operating in what you believe is a fair, open space. But in reality, you're already shadow banned from their loyalty. Not by design, by psychology. This is the first unseen consequence. You become misunderstood but not corrected, seen but not respected, present but not trusted. And you're left wondering, endlessly replaying, what did I do wrong? Let's peel back further. Modern culture tells you to be real, be vulnerable, speak your truth. But public spaces are not made for naked truth. They are made for social equilibrium. And when you violate that, not by being evil, but by being too raw, you activate an ancient neurological alarm system in others. This person makes me uncomfortable. This person breaks the rules of what is safe to engage. This person must be avoided, or worse, managed. It sounds harsh, but that's how emotional contagion works. Researchers in effective neuroscience have shown that emotional instability, even brief glimpses of it, are socially contagious. When you express fear, sadness, rage, or despair too openly in public, the group absorbs it, and without knowing it, they begin to associate you with discomfort. You become a trigger, not a person. That's why some people seem to magnetize opportunities, while others, just as talented, kind, or smart, are mysteriously overlooked. They violated a rule they never knew existed. They let themselves be too real too soon in front of people not built to hold them. Here's another hidden effect. You start to internalize your exile. You begin self-censoring, shrinking. You enter every public space with invisible armor. You don't laugh as freely. You monitor your words. You make yourself smaller to avoid judgment, and over time, this becomes second nature. You lose your edge. You lose your presence. You become forgettable. And nothing is more dangerous than being forgotten while still alive. This is not paranoia. This is social neuroscience. The brain tracks social rejection in the same way it tracks physical pain. When someone rolls their eyes at you, when you're cut off mid-sentence, when your story is met with silence, it activates the same neural circuits as being physically injured. This means you're not overreacting when you feel crushed after an awkward public moment. Your amygdala doesn't know it's just a comment. It reads it as a threat to survival. Because for most of human history, being disliked meant being alone, and alone meant dead. Machiavelli didn't have MRI machines, but he didn't need them. He understood human nature through war, betrayal, alliances, and ambition. He saw the same truth that modern psychologists now confirm. People do not act according to justice. They act according to perception. And when perception turns against you, facts become irrelevant. This is the third consequence. Truth no longer matters. Your intention doesn't matter. Your character doesn't matter. Only the narrative matters. And if you're not crafting it, someone else is. Let's take an example. Imagine a public figure, a leader, or even a local community member who during a moment of crisis breaks down emotionally, cries, panics, admits confusion. Privately, it's human. Publicly, it's suicide. The story becomes they can't handle pressure, even if they handled everything else flawlessly. That's how availability bias works. People judge you by the most memorable, not the most frequent behaviors. So what happens over time? You begin to fear your own instincts. You start to feel like your natural responses, grief, doubt, frustration, are liabilities. And you begin crafting two selves, the one you show the world and the one you bury deep. But the longer this goes on, the harder it is to tell which one is real. And here we land on perhaps the darkest consequence of all, self-alienation. Not only have others misunderstood you, you have started to misunderstand yourself. You stop trusting your gut. You second-guess your needs. You keep rehearsing the past like a prisoner learning his own confession. This is the true cost of not knowing how to navigate public space with awareness. It's not just about social rejection. It's about psychic erosion. But this erosion is not inevitable. There is a way to break the spell, to reclaim your presence, your dignity, your sovereignty. And no, it's not about becoming more agreeable, or quieter, or fake. It's about learning to wield your truth like a blade, not a confession. It's about understanding the rules of visibility, so you can choose when to reveal and when to hold, when to attack and when to vanish. Because if the world is a stage, as Shakespeare said, then Machiavelli wrote the lighting cues. And it's time you learned how to flip the switch. So what now? You've seen the battlefield. You've walked through the invisible wounds, the subtle exiles, the shrinking of the self, the trap of being real in rooms that can't hold you. You know now that public spaces are not arenas of truth, but theaters of narrative. And if you don't learn the script, you're written out. But rebellion does not begin with rage. It begins with awareness. And then, with something far more dangerous, strategy. Let's start with the most radical truth of all. You do not owe the world your unfiltered self, not because you should lie, but because your truth is sacred. And sacred things aren't spilled onto public floors. They are revealed to the worthy, to the few who've earned the burden of seeing you. This is your first weapon, selective vulnerability. We've been sold the idea that vulnerability is strength, but that's only half the story. Vulnerability becomes strength only when it is timed, measured, and directed with precision. Otherwise, it's not bravery. It's bleeding in front of wolves. So you must ask, who is this person in front of me? Do they have the depth to receive what I'm about to say? Or am I simply trying to be seen, even by the blind? Real rebellion means learning to contain yourself, not repress, but contain. To know that your emotions are yours to process, not display. To understand that power doesn't come from exposure, it comes from control. This is the second weapon, mystery. Machiavelli wrote that a prince must always appear virtuous, even if he is not to deceive, but to protect the state. You are your own state, and mystery is not manipulation, it is discipline of visibility. Do not show all your cards in the first conversation. Don't explain your every feeling to acquaintances. Don't justify yourself to those who wouldn't defend you in a room you're not in. Let silence do the heavy lifting. Let the room wonder what you're thinking, because in that wondering, you reclaim space. Now, what about public failure, embarrassment, moments when the mask slips? Here enters your third weapon, detachment from image. This might seem contradictory, but here's the paradox. To master public life, you must care deeply about how you're perceived, without needing it. This is not indifference. It is strategic detachment. You learn to observe yourself from a third point of view, like a chess player watching the board. If someone mocks you, you don't flinch. If someone misjudges you, you let them, knowing that power comes not from defending your image, but from mastering your silence. Think of Marcus Aurelius, Roman emperor and Stoic philosopher. He wrote in his journals, "You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think." In other words, live like the performance could end at any moment. Stop clinging to applause. Stop chasing approval. Start playing for something higher. Self-respect, internal power, quiet clarity. You'll find that people begin treating you differently when you no longer need them to. Now, what of manipulation? What if others use these same tactics to gain power? That's why you must cultivate your fourth weapon, psychological X-ray vision, the ability to see through performance. Learn to watch for the subtle cues. Who smiles only when others do? Who asks questions but never listens to the answers? Who flatters when eyes are on you but flattens your presence when you leave? Study tone, timing, micro-expressions, discrepancies between word and action. Because to break free from manipulation, you must first know when it's happening, and most of the time it's invisible. It hides beneath politeness, behind shared laughter, inside phrases like "just being honest" or "don't take it personally." The rebellion here is not about confrontation, it's about recognition, and then redirection. You don't need to expose them, you simply stop feeding them your energy. You begin managing your presence the way a general manages his army, positioning, withholding, waiting. And then comes your fifth weapon, perhaps the most dangerous of all, self-sovereignty. This is when you no longer show up in public to prove anything, not your intelligence, not your worth, not even your goodness. You speak when it adds power, you move when it creates leverage. You help others not to be liked, but because it aligns with your code. Your morality becomes internalized, not performance-based. This is where Machiavelli and spiritual wisdom intersect. You cease to be a puppet, you become a presence. Because the moment you stop reacting to the crowd reacts to you. You become the one people watch, the one they ask before they speak, the one whose silence weighs more than their noise. You don't need to be loud, you don't need to be liked, you only need to be aligned. And that alignment, when cultivated deeply, creates an aura, not mystical, practical, observable. You radiate power, and the room adjusts itself to you. This is not an easy path. It requires isolation, observation, unlearning. But once you begin, you can never return to your previous blindness. You'll walk into rooms and instantly feel the power dynamics. You'll know who to speak to and who to study silently. You'll know which parts of yourself to reveal and which to guard like sacred relics. And slowly, quietly, the world shifts around you. Not because you forced it, but because you no longer chase it. You became the mountain in a world of weather, and suddenly no storm can move you. But this is not the end, because beyond power, beyond tactics, beyond rebellion itself, lies something deeper. A truth that is not just strategic, but transformative. Let us go there now. Let us go. There comes a moment when you realize that every room you've ever walked into, every cafe, boardroom, party, or crowded street, was never just a gathering of people. It was a network of masks, a theater of shadows where everyone is trying desperately not to be fully seen. You believed once that power meant being louder, more confident, more unshakable than everyone else. You believed that survival meant outsmarting them, playing the same game, just better. But the final, most profound realization is this: the real power is not in the mask you wear. It's in knowing that you don't need it to define you. Machiavelli, for all his reputation as a manipulator, hinted at this truth in his own way. He spoke of virtù, not simply virtue, but the ability to shape reality with inner strength, to adapt, to bend fortune without breaking yourself. It was never about deception for its own sake. It was about freedom from the need to be anything but sovereign over yourself. This is the ultimate liberation, to stand in the storm of public opinion and feel nothing, to move through rooms and sense the shifting perceptions, the judgments, the silent calculations, and yet remain unmoved, because you no longer measure yourself through their eyes. The prison. You never saw most people live in a prison built of mirrors. Every look, every comment, every subtle gesture from others reinforces their sense of identity. They believe they are good because others nod approvingly. They believe they are bad because someone raises an eyebrow. They shrink when ignored, swell when praised, and slowly, without even realizing it, their lives become a reaction, not a creation. This is the final danger Machiavelli warned against: the loss of sovereignty. When your self-worth depends on the crowd, you are no longer a person. You are a reflection. But when you finally see this prison, when you see how every glance from others tries to sculpt you, something remarkable happens. You step outside of it. You begin to understand that their judgments, their whispers, even their admiration are not about you. They are about them, their fears, their desires, their own secret battles for validation. And in that moment, you are free. The shift from control to presence. Until now, the game seemed to be about control. Control your image, control your words, control your exposure. And yes, those tactics matter in public, but beyond all tactics is a deeper law. Power belongs to the one who no longer needs to prove anything. Think of the rare individuals who seem to hold a room without saying a word. They are not begging for approval, nor are they trying to dominate. They have moved past both. They simply are. Their presence is not a mask, but a force. Quiet but undeniable. This is the paradox. The less you need power, the more it gravitates to you. The less you try to impress, the more people feel drawn to your authenticity. The less you chase visibility, the more unforgettable you become. The courage to be unmoved. This final realization is not about withdrawal or arrogance. It is about courage. The courage to exist without explanation. To speak only when your words add value, not validation. To show emotion without fearing it will be weaponized. Because your identity no longer depends on the outcome. This is not easy. It requires a breaking, a death of the self you once believed you were, the self that needed applause, the self that feared silence, the self that thought being loved by everyone was the same as being whole. But when that self falls away, what's left is something indestructible, something that cannot be exiled because it no longer plays by tribal rules. The eternal lesson of Machiavelli. Machiavelli's wisdom has often been misunderstood as cold, ruthless, manipulative. But beneath the sharp edges of his words lies a hard truth. Life will not always reward your goodness. It will reward your clarity, to see the world as it is, not as you wish it to be. To understand that human behavior is a storm of insecurity, ambition, and fear, and that you are not immune to it unless you choose to step outside its current. To learn not just what not to do in public, but why you ever felt the need to do it. And once you understand that, you begin to play a different game. Not the game of masks, not even the game of rebellion, but the game of truthful presence. Your final act. So what are the 11 things you should never do in public? At this point, you know they are not just actions, but mindsets. Never expose your wounds to those who seek entertainment, not healing. Never try to win arguments in spaces where perception outweighs reason. Never explain your worth. Let your silence and results do it for you. Never seek validation from the crowd. It will never be enough. Never forget that even kindness, poorly timed, can make you weak. Never ignore the power of watching before speaking. Never underestimate how one careless moment can define you in someone's mind. Never confuse vulnerability with strategy. They are not the same. Never believe the crowd's approval means you are truly seen. Never reveal the full weight of your ambitions. Guard them like sacred fire. And above all, never forget that your power lies not in their perception, but in your ability to remain sovereign over yourself. The final image. Imagine yourself walking into a room tomorrow. Nothing about the crowd changes. The same eyes, the same conversations, the same subtle judgments. But something in you has shifted. You are no longer hunting for approval. You are not shrinking to avoid notice. You are still, a force unto yourself. And suddenly they notice. They feel it. The quiet gravity of someone who doesn't need them. This is not a performance. This is freedom. And once you taste it, you will never return to the old ways of moving through the world. Because Machiavelli's true warning was never about others. It was about you. Will you rule yourself, or will the crowd rule you? Right now, there are 2 videos on your screen, hand-picked just for you. Click to watch them. I'm sure you'll love every second.